Hi guys, welcome back to our Porsche restoration project. Today we're going to go over the installation of our front suspension. You can see I've got everything laid out here on the ground, ready to go. So what I want to try and do here is I want to break this whole system down piece by piece and go over all the different details, different lubricants and torque settings, and hopefully right order in how to put this together. I'm sure there's a few different ways to assemble this. What we're going to start with here this morning, we're going to start with the stabilizer bar, which for me that seems like the most logical starting point, stripped back on a bare shell. So we'll get that guy slid into place, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to roll over to this left side, kind of like we did the rear suspension. I'm going to just roll through it, put it together, work out all the bugs, and once we've got something I think we'll assemble smoothly. Then we'll go over to the right side and get that going step by step. So first let's get started on our stabilizer bar. Let's take a look at that and see what's involved. So I think the first thing worth noting here on the stabilizer is our bushings. This particular stabilizer bar in this car is a 13 millimeter rod, and at some point they switched up to a 15 millimeter. I think that was from 68 on up. So the problem I had was getting two matching stabilizer bushings from Porsche to fit that. I managed to get one. I ordered the correct part number and even the incorrect part number for this bushing to try and get it by chance through literally half different suppliers, and no longer available. So I probably got the last one in existence there. So I've decided to go to the aftermarket for those. Euro is what I'm using here, and these are actually really good quality bushings. So if you need to go with a 13 millimeter aftermarket, I recommend these. These are not going to be any problem at all, and a very good match to our original Porsches. So sometimes parts are no longer available. You don't really have much choice there. Okay, let's go ahead and get this guy slid in. And then next we want to put a little bit of synthetic grease on the outside of our bushing. The reason we want to coat this is so that it seats and pulls through our housing cover that clamps down on top of it. And then a little bit of synthetic grease on the inside of our rod here. That's where our rotation is going to take place in there. And nothing on the back side here. Reason we don't want anything back here, that needs to bottom out against the body and have plenty of grip. Okay, here we go. Alright, that's going to bottom out against there. Put our housing over the top. Seat in there like that. Okay, snap that one in place. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw my bolts down about halfway, go around to the other side, draw them down about halfway, and then come back a little bit more, and the other side a little bit more, until we gradually draw these in together. Okay, you can see our right side here is running about halfway, and then our left side, same thing. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to drip a little bit of Loctite in on those threads there, and run them in equally at 18.1 pounds. And then once both sides are seated, get some denatured alcohol and clean up all the excess synthetic grease. Make sure this shaft right here is really clean. This is where our lever gets bolted on there. We want to make sure it gets plenty of grip. Okay, let's go ahead and torque that down. Okay, nothing difficult there. So the next thing I want to do, I want to center up my steering rack so that my left and right sides are about equal. So when we put our tie rods on there, we can adjust them out and be somewhat in the ballpark. So what I've done is I put a reference mark on the center of the wheel, 12 o'clock, and that's all the way to the right, cranked all the way to the right, just stopping, not putting any force on there. And then I'm counting backwards. I got 1, 2, and it looks like about 2 3/4 revolutions until it stops to the left. So now what I want to do is I want to go back the other way, half that distance, and that should bring us to center. So we want to go back 1 3/8. So here's 1, and then half would be right about here. 3/8 is going to be right about there. Okay, so I've made a reference mark. That's about right. Let's go down to the bottom side, measure off the body, and see if we're in the ballpark. Okay, so then measuring from our tie rod on out to the body, looked like about 4.25 inches approximately. This is just a approximate downstairs here. I don't think that this would be any accurate measurement at all, but at least we can kind of see if we get it in the ballpark. Let's go around the other side, see what that looks like. Okay, and then same thing on this side. Look like right at about 4.25 also. So I think we're pretty close on target there. So what I'm going to do now, let me go ahead and roll through this side. Let me get it assembled, work everything out, take a look at it, and then we'll go around to the other side and break it down piece by piece. Okay, so we got our left side put together here. This whole setup took me about 6 hours to get through everything, work out all the details. Sometimes a manual is very helpful in assembling and putting back together some of these parts. And in some areas it's just real gray, doesn't cover much material at all. So a little trial and error is the only way you're going to get through it. One of the issues I ran into here was our tie rod arm, how it hooks up back to our inner tie rod inside there. So what happened is the bolt that threads through there, that comes through the front side, not able to get it in with the steering rack in the car. So had to drill some holes to access that and put those in there. You can cheat and put them in backwards, but it's not really strong enough to do the job. Putting them in backwards, you can end up with a problem driving. So I don't recommend cheating and putting those in backwards. The force is against it. Bolt really needs to go in from that direction. Let's go up top side and see what I did to fix that. So here we are looking at the inside of the gas tank cavity. So what I did is I pulled the steering inboard as far as I could get it. From the inside of that cavity in there, I made a mark and drilled a pilot hole from the inside, centered on the bolt, and then from the outside, drilled this hole here, and then plugged it with a door plug. You just put a door plug in there, and that covers it up. That's going to give us future access and serviceability to that area should we ever need to get to it. Let's go around the other side and take a look and see what that looks like without everything hooked up. Okay, a little bit better view from this side, so you can see that bolt, the head of that bolt. Not possible with the length on that bolt to hit the body and go in from this side. Whether the steering shaft is fully extended or fully inboard, no way to get it in there. You can get it in from the backside, but I really don't recommend flipping that over because of the forces against it. So that particular bolt, right now I just have it snug with a split washer. That's the way it came out of there. And on the back side there is no nut. There's just a cotter pin, and that's all that holds it in there. I could find nothing in the manual anywhere that talked about this tie rod fork. No diagrams, no method of assembly, no torque settings, nothing. So either I'm missing a page or it's just something that got overlooked writing up the manual. Anyways, in my mind, this thing should go in here where you have slight resistance, but not too tight. You don't really want to seize this arm up. This thing needs to be able to pivot up and down. And then put your cotter key in there, and that should be it. Okay, let's go up top and take a look at the strut mount. So looking at our strut mount, so what I've done to give it an initial setting, the strut mounting plate goes in from the bottom side. You can see there's some free area around it. It's not possible to do a accurate front end alignment at this time with these struts. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to center that mounting plate in there, in that round area. Plenty of adjustment to be made later. And just slightly torquing down these retaining bolts just to hold it in place. Top nut, I can go ahead and torque that down to full spec, but these adjustment nuts, I'll wait till the car gets fully assembled, and then under full weight conditions, full gas tank, spare tire, then we can make some adjustments in there. I think I can get it pretty close Once we put our rotors on, I'll wait till we put rotors on to do a tracking alignment. But as far as our camber and caster, camber adjustment on this is going to be left to right. So you have a minimal adjustment that can be done there. And caster is front to back. So a little bit of adjustment that can be made, but not at this stage. Okay, let's get this right side going here. So what I'm going to start with is the simplest thing, which is really our strut mounting plate. So that's just going to slide into this area here. You can see the front to back adjustment and our left to right. So what I'm going to do, just put my retaining bolts in there and just snug them down. Okay, just finger tight for now. Should be good. And then next, let's put our steering lever arm on. That just presses on there. And then putting our clamps in place, so the indent, this goes on the inside. And I'm using wave washers on the heads and split washers on the nuts. And just a little Loctite on our threads. And then we want to center our clamps up here, make sure they're not crooked. Other thing we want to look out for, manual is very specific on the distance from the face of the stabilizer bar to the face of the drop link arm here. So that's approximately 1 millimeter back, which is ever so slight reveal on the edge there. You want to take a closer look at that. And we want about 1 millimeter in there. Next, we're going to slide our lower ball joint in place. So what I've done is I've just taken a Rolex pad and buzzed the flat surfaces, make sure we don't have any paint buildup. Really tight in there. Just wiggle that in there. Okay, and then make sure we got good alignment on our holes. Next, we're going to install our drop link bracket. Also, these bolts, these have a cotter key. Always like to use the biggest cotter key that I can fit in those holes. So go in there. You have to tap those in also. Okay, so once our bolts are seated, then we want to put our castellated nut on there. Also using a spring washer to go with that. Once I get that torque down, torque on that is 54.2 pounds. Let me get those torque down, run the pins in there, and then we can get started on building our drop link. So then our drop link is going to go in place here. First thing we got to do, we got to press in our new bushings in this cylinder here, and then also press these sleeves in to the bushing. So going to need to go into the shop, put this in a vise, put a little lubricant on there, and press them in that way. Okay, so we got our first one pressed in there. That went in pretty good. I'm just using a synthetic grease on our rubber bushing here, and then also in this inner sleeve. Let's go ahead and press this one in. Just got to really get on it by hand, and then give it a little screwdriver assist. All right, there it goes. Just kind of wiggle it around a little bit. Okay, it's in. And then to press our sleeves in there, you can see how much tighter that's going to be than that hole. We're going to need to coat the inside in here using a Q-tip, and then a little bit of grease on the outside of the spindle. Okay, let's put that in the vise, and that should press that in there. Okay, then using a washer that's bigger than our hole for backing, I'm going to put that up against our vise here. Slide this guy into place here. And then just slightly apply pressure. And we'll have to kind of roll it around and just massage it to get it going. Okay, there it goes. Okay, and then that spindle should press through the washer and bottom out the other side. Okay, there it is. Just tighten it back up here one more time. And just kind of roll it around a little bit. And I'll seat everything. Okay, that's what it should look like. Let's go put her on. So locating this is pretty specific. One end has a 90-degree end, and the other end has a slight bend in it. You can see it's leaning this way. So our 90-degree end goes down. The bent end leans this direction. It's going to be on the top there, like so. And then we'll run our bolts in there. Same thing. I got a wave washer under the front. Put a little Loctite on there. Backside will have a split washer and then a nut. I'll go ahead and thread that in there, see what it looks like. And then on the bottom, we're going to need to just jack it up ever so slight. Get that to line up right about there. Okay, there we are. Okay, everything worked out real good there, located nice. 18.1 pounds also on those two bolts. Final torque setting on those. So let's go into the shop now, take a look at our Koni struts. There's some adjustments that need to be made on those, and then also we can do kind of a bench build out there, and then we can bring it out, put her in. So here's a close-up side-by-side of our original Bogue strut with our Koni replacement cartridge. And this is a part number I'm using for the Koni. That's for the early cars, and they can be slightly adjusted depending on your model. The original Bogue, I had a cut to get that out of there. I was in so tight, there's no way I could get it out. But pretty much shot. So Koni adjustable is going to make a real nice replacement for that. One small issue with the gland nut as far as that seating and bottoming out. However, it will work, and we can get proper torque spec on that. So let's go ahead and go over the adjustment and see how those work. Okay, so I'm going to try to explain this as simple as I can to follow along. So what I've done, I made some marks on here, some reference marks. Right now the shaft is pulled out in a non-engaged fashion. So what happens when we push the shaft down, it engages in a fork down there and then drops in. Right there, you can see it drop in. Okay, so it's dropped in and backed off to full soft adjustment. So going clockwise, keeping it engaged in the fork, it goes about almost two full, almost but not quite two full turns. You can see my arrows there. Okay, so what we want to do for 912s and Targas, what they recommend from Koni is a full soft adjustment, and for 911s, 2 half turns from 0. So let's go ahead and back that off to 0. 1. Okay, we're back to 0. It's still engaged in the fork down there. Okay, so now we're going to go 1 half turn, and then another half turn right there. Okay, so that's going to be it for the 911. So then I'm going to pull it out and override it. Okay, now we're good. And that's really all there is to it. So for your 912s and Targas, engage the fork, back it off all the way, and pull it out. You should be good. And then having a look at our buffer, so you can see the Koni replacement buffer, identical in length to original Bogue. But they do give you an extra buffer in this kit, so you could add on one more buffer, give you a little bit taller adjustment in here. You can see off their diagram here. So I think some of the later models had a little bit taller stop on there. So you could just add that in there, and that should give you what you need with the same strut. And then just a quick look at our housing. So restoration on this, basically just sandblasting, POR 15 on our casting on the ends there. And then the paint I used to match the Koni color, this is made by Duplicolor, is 1605 Ford Red. That's a Duplicolor engine paint, and color on that real close match to Koni. So the only issue I found was different from our original Bogue to our Koni replacement was the way this gland nut seats and bottoms out. So originally it would sit down on top of this flange on our Bogue, and this lip right here would sit down on our housing and bottom out. However, on our new replacement, what's going to happen, it's going to sit down on this flange here, right here, and it's not quite going to bottom out here. You're going to have a little bit of a space in there. That's fine, it'll work. Basically your torque's going to be on the threads, and your hold down is going to be on this flange. If it was the other way around, let's just say we had space here, and it was sitting down on our cylinder, then we'd have to put a spacer in here. But this way it's going to work. You're just going to have a little bit of space in here. Okay, here we go. Just slide in the cylinder. You got a little space in there. And then a little bit of Loctite on our threads. Just thread that all the way down. Okay, then we'll just put it in the vise, torque it down. And then 95 pounds is the torque. Okay, next bump stop and a rubber buffer. And we'll want to make sure our shaft is fully extended to install it. Okay, full up here. And put our dust shield over. Slide over the top here. Okay, that's it. Let's go put her on. So first thing we need to do before we put our strut in place, we're going to install the steering lever. That's going to go on top of our lower ball joint stud. This nut here, this is going to torque down to 32.5 pounds, and then we're going to pin that, tune up our mating surfaces real good, and then we should be able to slide her in. And then before we slide our strut in there, let's just go ahead and double check, make sure our ball joint feels right. So it should feel smooth and very snug. That feels just about right there. Okay, let's put that strut in place. Okay, so when we're sliding it in, we want to make sure we don't compress the shaft any. It's going to make it real tough to get that nut on there on the top side once it's in place if we compress it. So that goes in real gentle, and then down here, want to make sure we have our locating dowel in place. Right about there, and then we'll draw the rest in with our bolts. So these are the 3 bolts that are going to come in from the bottom side. The long bolt here, this is going to be in the rear where the dowel pin is, and 2 shorter bolts up front, and then using new safety tabs to lock those over, and 34 pounds torque on those. So what I'm doing on the bottom side here, I'm just applying a little bit of pressure with a jack, just trying to close up the 2 mating surfaces there. I got my bolts in there and locking tabs, only finger tight. So when I get to the top here, I want to make sure I have enough length on my shaft that comes through. I can put my bushing in over the sleeve, and then my first washer on there, lip facing up, and then our safety washer there, and then a nut. So then we can torque that down. Now we're going to not lose distance on our shaft when we tighten everything. Okay, we're torqued to 34 pounds. Just bending our safety tabs over. Okay, so we got our bottom side all finished up here. Our locking tabs are all peened over. I'm going to adjust these tie rod ends after we put our brake rotors on, probably make it a little bit easier for us. But right now they're just in the ballpark. One thing we want to do before we tighten our top nut on the strut mount up top is we want to make sure we apply a little bit of jack pressure from the bottom side. That way it bottoms out from underneath, gives you some backing while we tighten that nut down. Also, I talked to the guys at Koni, and they recommend that you do full torque, 58 pounds on this, after the car is under full weight and back on the ground. And then the last thing we're going to bolt on here today is going to be the brake carrier plate. We'll Loctite on our bolts. Okay guys, let's stop here for today. Let's just look it over real quick and see how we did. So yeah, assembling front suspension on this car, really not too bad. Not a whole lot of areas you can get yourself into trouble on. However, I will say the steering on this car is definitely not forgiving. So where we go from here, I'm going to go ahead and lay out the brake sets all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and assemble this side prior to our next video, get this side set up. And then we'll go around the other side and break down front and rear step by step and see how to put all that together. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.